Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. This episode is titled Winter Trout on Artificials. I'm going to be talking with Captain Dana Tabarrini of Reel2Reel Fishing. Reel2Reel Fishing is charters and a podcast outside of the New Bern area. We're going to be talking about speed of fishing. We're going to be talking about the size of baits and lures, depths to consider, types of gear, and then ultimately what to do when it doesn't seem like anything is working. My name is Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community since 2003. We've been bringing you fishing reports, fishing information, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, and here in our latest and greatest effort, the Saltwater Podcast Series, where we reach out to our captain and guide friends from up and down the coast and ask them to share with us their insights, their knowledge on how to catch more fish more often. And in this endeavor, I am joined every week by podcast partner Billy Thorpe of Thorpe Creative. Billy, welcome to another podcast episode.
What is going on, Gary, man? Good to see you. It's always good to be in the podcast chair. Super excited about Dana being on the show. He's a part of our weekly fishing reports we've been doing. And, man, just a wealth of knowledge. He spends a lot of time on the water, so he knows what he's doing. I'm excited to hear about it. And, man, congratulations, Gary. This is episode 140. So
140.
140. Most people
we each
like
get a watch.
Yeah, we get the Fisherman's Post watch. I'll pick up a couple from
the Thorpe
store.
Creative watch. I want the Thorpe Creative watch.
Yeah.
I don't want the. That sounds like I'm buying it. I want the Thorpe Creative.
Yeah, no. I'll buy. I'll swing by the thrift store on the way home, and then we'll just like put stickers over the top. It'll be good. It'll be great. So yeah, so pretty exciting, man. It's pretty awesome. Every time you 150, we'll celebrate that too. But 140, I thought was pretty cool, especially to end the year. I know we got another special episode and an encore coming up, but pretty cool, man. Pretty cool adventure that we've been on, and Marine Warehouse has been there for 135 of those episodes. So just want to give hats on. I finally found my Marine Warehouse hat, so hats on to those guys, and really appreciate them. I got a quick message from them, and we'll be right back.
At Marine Warehouse, we have everything from trailer parts, engines, engine parts, new boats, boat parts, a full store. We have a service department. We are your one-stop shop for marine equipment and hardware.
We offer a wide variety of parts and accessories for all your marine needs. The best part about working at Marine Warehouse Center is to help customers really get the most out of their coastal lifestyle and share our love for the water.
At Marine Warehouse, we're here to get you out on the water because of our love for the water. We like being out there, and we want you out there with us.
All right, man, there they are.
There they are. Our guys, my guys. Man, here's my notice to everyone out there. Like, I want you to love your boat in 2023. I want you to love your boat. So come up with your laundry list now of items you would like done to your boat, your service list, your wish list, and then take it into Marine Warehouse Center, and they're going to make it happen. That's what I do every winter. I mean, that's real talk, man. I make a list. If the light's not working or the connection's failing, whatever it is, I write it down. And just about this time of year, I won't pull the boat till after Christmas, but after Christmas, I'm going to take it in and say, here you go. Here's my laundry list, Marine Warehouse Center. Looking forward to 2023.
Yeah, man, excited for those guys to be a part of it. And as we've tried to keeping up with Emmett over there at Marine Warehouse, he's a tough one to keep up with. So this week, somebody actually sent us a picture of Emmett doing a pretty adventurous thing, and I got to word this correctly because I want to give you a hint so you can figure out where in the world is Emmett. And right. I will say that the thing that he is doing, he is using the same material that you use to strap luggage onto the top of your car. So if you're traveling for the holidays, you use this material to strap stuff onto the top of your car. He's using it to do something else. That's a horrible hint.
He's bungee jumping.
Dude, okay, maybe this wasn't as wise as I thought it was. He is bungee jumping. Look at this. He's like doing a little he's doing a little cannonball. I mean, the cord looks like it's wrapping up a little weird over there on the right hand side. I don't know anything about bungee jumping, but I guess he's out in Kansas too. It's like pretty flat. So
I think the aliens wrote a message in that field. I just don't think we know how to read it.
Yeah, there you go. There's Emmett with
Good for Emmett.
Always camera ready, man. Adventurous and always looking at the camera. Wherever there's a camera,
Always smiling. Man, that guy's good.
Yeah, man. So appreciate those guys sponsoring the show for so long, and definitely looking forward to more shenanigans in 2023. So it'll be fun. Man, Gary, you want to talk a little bit about our fishing membership real quick?
Oh, yeah, man. I always enjoyed pitching that. So, again, we did weekly fishing reports from April through October. And now in the November through March section of the year that things have slowed down, fish, water, temps, all that. We are doing bi-weekly fishing reports still, so you want to know what's happening lately with the trout, striper, or other bites. But we're also doing live shows. So until we start up again, we'll be mixing in live shows, talking with 2, maybe 3 captains at a time, sharing their ideas together. Excuse me. And you as a member will be able to ask questions directly to the captain. So if you've wished that you could be sitting in my chair, say right here with the podcast, and I'm just missing questions that you wish I would ask, sign up to be a member, tune into the live shows, and then you can ask the questions.
Absolutely, man. And also I want to remind people too, we're doing a little bit in 2023 at the beginning, January and February. We're not going to be producing podcast episodes. So if you still want that type of content, then become a member and come hang out with us, live, because we won't have fresh shows. We got a ton of, obviously 140 episodes plus that you can go back and listen to, but it might be a good time to be a part of the membership and come hang out with us for sure during that down.
Yeah, I hope people agree. I hope people agree that after 140 or so episodes, we deserve a little bit of time off, and then we come back refresh. We'll come back better. We'll come back refreshed. Yeah. So hit the pause button. Come back strong.
Absolutely. And check out those old episodes, man. There's so much good information in there. So, and Dana's going to bring some more. But until then, I'll show you a fish picture, Gary, and I'll let you guys get on with it. We got Evan Chicoine. I don't know how to say. I butchered that guy's name. Sorry. With an 8-pound speckled trout that was caught on a small bluefish in the Sneads Ferry area. So, Gary, over or under? Is this thing 8 pounds? What do you think?
That's a big trout. He doesn't appear to be holding it out ridiculous far or anything like that. And I don't know. I'm going to give it to him, man. I'm going to give 8 pounds.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I did a little bit of research because I've never caught an 8-pound trout. Maybe 8-ounce trout. I'm up there like 8 ounces, maybe. So I did a little research. I got on Intercoastal Anglers Instagram, and because they post a lot of big fish catches and big trout and stuff. So I was comparing it, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to give it to him as well. So
all right,
my research,
we give it to him,
and good for that guy for catching a huge.
Good for that
fish.
guy.
Yeah, I mean nothing all like what Dana showed us pre-show, but.
Well, look, I'm going to bring Dana on. We're going to talk trout, and then at the conclusion. And this is actually a tough assignment today. At the conclusion, I'm coming back for Billy's best takeaway. And I say a tough assignment because I believe you're going to be inundated with Billy's best takeaway potentials.
100%. I'm ready, man. I'm ready.
All right. So my pleasure to welcome to the podcast for the first time, Captain Dana Tabarrini, Reel2Reel Fishing. Reel2Reel Fishing is both charters and podcast operating out of New Bern. Dana, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Looking forward to talking trout with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having me, Billy, Gary. We have a lot of fun off camera, so this should be interesting now that it's on camera.
Oh, yeah. This is going to, like I said, I'm going to ask you a couple of setup questions. I'm going to go eat a couple of tacos and come back and wrap the show up. But before we get to that, I don't care who you are. 2 questions before we begin the main event. You tell me you're ready. I give you question number 1.
Go for it.
Question number 1, Dana Tabarrini. Why should Billy, why should anyone out there listen to anything you have to say about a trout?
That's a pretty good question. My normal answer would be you probably shouldn't. You should probably go out and try stuff on your own. But no, I've been a charter captain. It's my 3rd year chartering. I've fished my entire life. Grew up here in New Bern. Fished everywhere from, up in Cool Springs area all the way down to Pamlico Point areas in and around Neuse. So I put, as we like to say, I put some time on the water and put some patterns together. And I feel like when you get on my boat, you've got just as good an opportunity to catch fish as with any other captain. So, and I can cater to small kids all the way up to 70, 80-year-old men. And, it's a good time.
Absolutely an acceptable answer. We are moving on to question number 2. And question number 2, as tradition goes, is a non-fishing related question. Again, you tell me you're ready. I give you question number 2.
I think I'm ready.
Question number 2 is about a trout, but it's about Mike Trout. And with you dropping Billy Madison and FedEx trivia on us in pre-show, I'm actually feeling like you're going to be able to answer a Mike Trout question or 2. Question number 1 about Mike Trout. In his rookie year, when he was on second base in the middle of the game, what baseball player did he ask for an autograph?
Oh my God, I know this answer too. They were playing at home, I think. I used to have season tickets to the Anaheim Angels, so now I feel really bad. I don't know. Who did he ask?
He asked Derek Jeter. He was starstruck as a rookie.
God. I knew it. I knew it. I was thinking it was a Yankee.
Well, look, I got another question. Since you feel like you should have known that one, I got one more for you. Which of these statements is true? Mike Trout has never won a playoff game. Mike Trout pitched a no-hitter in high school.
Mike Trout's never won a playoff game.
And he pitched a no-hitter. I gave you a trick question. They're both true. But I think people are ready for us to talk about the other Trout. And so, again, this is your podcast. I got the notes. In the notes, it said talking about the speed of fishing here because we're talking about winter trout. So if that's where you still feel like we should talk, then talk to me about the speed of fishing.
Sure. Obviously, it's mid-December right now. So the transition to really what I consider wintertime fishing hasn't really occurred yet. The water has cooled off down to, the low to mid 50s. But it only takes a day like today where it got to 70 degrees and water temp climbed up 57, 58 degrees. But typically what we'll be referring to will be once it gets to that sub 50 degree. And what I've noticed with people on the boat and having all kinds of different anglers on the boat, whether they're seasoned or whether they are seasoned and are refusing to learn a different way. I've watched a lot of guys just miss a lot of bites, mostly because of two things. When I say speed of fishing relative to conditions, I'm talking about the water temperature. And a lot of times I'll see people just fish way too fast. And when I say way too fast, I mean way, way too fast. Typically, I'm fishing some really deep water with respect to trout. We're talking 12 feet and deeper. And I'm using some things as light as, 3/8 of an ounce or 3/16 of an ounce, depending on how deep I'm going. But I want to get that lure way down to the bottom, and I want to pop it up off bottom and just kind of let it fall at its own pace, really, really, really slow. And one of the things I believe in is that the trout are deciding whether or not it's worth the energy to expend to eat that meal. I think they have to carefully weigh, am I going to chase this? If I chase this, I've got to expend a bunch of energy. And if I got to expend a bunch of energy, I've got to replace it with protein or some kind of food. And when it's really cold, that's really hard to do. So one definite thing I would recommend, whether you're fishing hard baits, soft plastics, swim baits, no matter what it is, you really want to slow down. You can vary that once the water temperature goes up with certain days. Like today, we could fish it a little quicker. Water temp got up to 54, 55, really, really fast. So we were able to fish a little faster and incite the bite. But I'm going to say in general, when you get past mid-December, you get into January, February, when it's 30 degrees outside and there's ice on your guides from the water freezing, you really, really, really want to slow down and let that bait just be in that fish's face as long as possible. So that's what I mean by speed of fishing.
So I guess my question would be, if I'm trying to visualize slowing everything down, when you're popping the bait off the bottom, is that a slow pop as well? And then if you're popping and just letting it naturally fall, whether it's a quick pop or a slower pop, are you retrieving or are you really not moving the bait towards the boat that much?
So the best way to answer that is, number one, people don't allow the bait to get all the way to the bottom. That's the number one mistake. Whether they're fishing too light of a jig head, or they're just not familiar with, or they don't have the right equipment to feel how sensitive it is when something like that gets all the way to the bottom, way, way, way down. The pop off bottom that can be kind of quick. I think what I mean by speed is that you need to let it really, 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 really get to the bottom. I mean, just hit the bottom. You need to feel that tick when it gets to the bottom. And when you pop it off bottom, you want to keep in contact with the lure. I've watched some guys on YouTube videos talk about having slack in the line so the fish can do this and do that. If they're slacking the line, that fish will never see you. Or you'll never feel it. You'll absolutely never feel it. And a speckled trout will devour that lure and spit it right back out before you even have a chance to set the hook if you're not in contact with it. So the pop is fast. Now that you've asked that question, I can see exactly what you're talking about in my head. The pop is fast, but the fall is slow. A lot of times people will pop too soon, and they're not back in the strike zone where that fish is. So yeah, great question, Gary. Awesome question.
And I guess the other part, are you worried much about retrieving it? Are you worried much about covering water on the way back to the boat? Or are you imagining, I'm not really trying to move it too much, I'm hoping a trout sees it and moves to it?
Gotcha. So if you think about just, I guess, geometry, you've got your rod here and the line goes out to where you've cast, because you've cast probably a decent amount of way away from the boat. I'm never really vertical jigging right below the boat. Not that you can't do that. You can, especially areas around structure like bridges and overpasses, train trestles, stuff like that. If you've got relatively deep water, you can vertically jig for them. But this is more referring to, say you're in the back of a creek and you've got, you're in 8 foot of water and you've got a 14, 15 foot hole. I'm casting over into that hole and working it back towards me, and I'm popping it off bottom. It's naturally going to come back towards you, but I want that fall to be as natural as possible. I don't want to interrupt that fall going down.
Okay. Man, I follow good. Next in my notes is size of bait, size of the lure.
Gotcha. So there's a phrase that I've heard my whole life, and it's elephants eat peanuts. I know there is a big hype about large baits, large fish, big fish like big baits, big fish like this, big fish like that. My own experience this time of year, again, you have to think, what is the fish actually doing? The fish is trying to survive for the next 2 months until it warms up again. And again, this goes back to vulnerable prey, baits that are relatively easy to just kind of suck right in and devour it and be done. It's not going to want to chase something, away from it. So like a swim bait that's being pulled too fast, if the swim bait's 5-6 inches, it may just say that's not worth my time. That doesn't mean you can't catch fish on big lures, because you'll have a million people say, well, I catch them on this, I catch them on that. I'm sure you do. But what I've seen is this time of year, I like to downsize. When I say downsize, I know you guys at home can't see this, but this is a slick lure. And the slick lure is probably 5 inches long, 4.5, somewhere in there. They have their own version of a slick junior or a baby slick, whichever one they want to call it, and it's down to about 3 inches. And both of them have a ball tail on the end of the tail, and I use a jig head of blue water candy jig heads, and they help that bait kind of stand up on end. When I downsize, I want the smaller version of the bait. I want to be able to sneak in those areas and have something that's an easy meal for it to swallow. And one of the reasons that I really like that, besides the fact that I believe 100% that they are trying to just survive over the winter and it's an easy meal, is that jig fits in that fish's mouth real easy. And when you feel that slight little thump and you set the hook, most of the time that jig head goes right into the roof of the mouth of the trout, and it does not get pulled out. And what I've also noticed is mirror lures. It's amazing how you have 6 hooks on this thing, and a lot of times they can spit it right back out without it ever being hooked. They typically don't spit this back out right away. They feel like they've succeeded in grabbing an easy meal, and that gives you a better opportunity for a hook set. So what I like to do is I like to downsize. I've got a couple of that, options here you guys can see on video if you can't see it on video. Just imagine it looks like a stick. It looks like a pinched off turd, I guess is the best way to put it, like cat poop. I don't know. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But I like a natural looking color for these stick baits. And then if I am fishing a larger bait, if it's a warmer day and they're a lot more active, I like some really, really bright colors. So, but I really prefer to use those smaller baits in the wintertime. I've even gone as far as, and I know some of my friends, some of the captains down here, Kevin Doerr, Ashley King, Ben Ricks, those guys do the same thing. You can take a crappie jig with a really, really small crappie lure and catch these speckled trout almost in the same places you're catching crappie.
So I guess I have a couple of questions, man. And we're talking wintertime. I think you said 50 degree mark. Have you moved completely away from hard baits and it's a soft plastic game?
I always tell the fish, or let the fish tell me what to do. Like today I started with the Little John, which is the stick bait. That's your little soft plastic. And as the sun came up and it warmed the water up more and more and more, those fish left a deep channel and started working up on a flat. When they got up on that flat, I switched over to the mirror lure. But again, it's a 17 MR and not a 27, so it's not a really large one. I like the soft dine version as well, but I think you have to follow where the fish are going. They're going to be in those deep holes at night. They're going to move up to feed, and you just kind of follow where they're going and let them react to the bait. If you're in 3-4 foot of water, 5 foot of water, and they've slid up on that shelf, switch over to something like a hard bait and see if it changes the result.
And you said with color, you said natural colors, but it looks like you're a fan of chartreuse as well.
Yeah, so I like the natural colors on the stick bait, and I'd love to have a million reasons why, but it just so happens that I can take this color in any water and fish it, whether it's dirty, clean, it doesn't matter. And maybe it's because it's a confidence thing, but I have more golden brim Little Johns in my boat than I have any other lure. And I feel like as natural as it is and as easy as it is to work, it could be a confidence thing, but the fish tend to react a lot better. I like bright colors in clean water. A lot of people think differently. I'm okay with that. When I say bright colors, this is a hot olive 17 MR. It's got an orange bottom, yellow or chartreuse side, and green top. It's a matte finish. It's not very shiny. It doesn't have broken glass look or anything. And of course, I always like to, dress it up with my own trebles, dress trebles or whatever. But I really like those bright colors in clean water. And in this year, right now we have a very low amount of rainfall, so you got a very clean water environment. You can actually see those fish in 3, 4, 5 foot of water hitting your mirror lure from 30, 40 feet away, relatively easy, and it's really exciting. But again, my experience, love catching these on these bright colors on the hard baits, and on the soft baits, I do like to stay natural with the smaller one. Again, there's always the exception. I haven't caught a whole lot of fish on that, but I'm also not very comfortable with the slick bait as some of my friends are. So I'm forcing myself to fish with it. This one got the eyes beat out of it today. So.
Well, let me see, man. Next on the list is depths to consider. You've already been touching on depths, but let's fine tune that conversation.
Yeah. So a lot of times, let's say when I started this morning, I had 2 guys on the boat. They're both avid fishermen. One really likes swim baits. One really likes everything, kind of like me. We're easing down this channel, and I'm marking fish all through the channel. Channel's maybe 15 to 18 feet deep. Some spots are even 20 feet. And over to one side is a big, long flat that goes maybe from 20 feet up to about 7 feet and then 3 feet. And I see these fish on bottom. The sun hasn't come up yet. As a matter of fact, the the Garmin has any, and up on this flat and just put the poles down. And I said, let's fish in this direction because those fish are going to move out of that channel up onto this flat. And sure enough, as the sun started coming up, we're fishing jigs on bottom, working it off that channel and working it up on that flat. And it was just pretty much like clockwork. So if it's super cold at night or even cool, you know, I'm gonna stick to those deep holes, and I'm gonna be on a flat next to it so I can work either the deep hole or the flat depending on where they move. And again, not every situation is like that, but that's when I say depths to consider relative to conditions. If it's warm out, I want to be on that flat. If it's cold out, I want to be in that deep hole, fishing towards that flat as the sun comes up and heats the water up.
So when you're talking deeper channel and when you're talking shallower flat, what kind of depth are we basically talking? I'm sure it changes a little bit depending on which channel, which flat, but in general, how about some numbers?
So general, I'm gonna say channels. I'm gonna consider a channel or a deep hole 10 foot or better. I'm gonna consider a secondary ledge maybe 5 foot to 10 foot, and then your primary or your flat being 2, 3, 4, 5 feet. And again, I always like to be next to a deep water. Some even if it's a bend in a creek that happens to be 15 feet deep, that bend usually has a flat associated with it somewhere. And I like to set myself up where I can exploit both of those, the deep side as well as the shallow side.
All right. I mean, I don't know if I have any more follow-up questions for depths to consider. I mean, I've understood everything you said. Is there anything else you had in your mind you might talk about in that category?
As far as depth, the one thing, and this is going to be true for every category we talk about, a trout will do what it wants to do and prove you wrong. So you'll fish on a 70-degree day and they'll be down in the bottom at 19 feet for some reason. On the next day, it'll be 40 degrees out and they're not on the flat, or they're not in the hole, they're on the flat. So that has to do with the water temperature of where they are. It has to do with salinity. It has to do with a whole lot of factors, but there's no way to put all those factors together and say it's one thing why they bit or they didn't. You've just got to literally just try. Just fish that deep hole. If they're not there, move up that secondary ledge, fish 5 to 7 feet, move up to the flat and try that. It's electronics are your friend. They're going to show you where the fish are, but getting them to react, that's a whole different story. And that's kind of why we're even talking about this. So I'm going to throw in all three places to figure out where they are.
Okay. Well, man, if you're talking about electronics, maybe I take that as the segue to talking about gear. I mean, gear is pretty an expansive topic, but let's see where you go.
Yeah, there's a ton of things when we talk about gear. The number one thing that comes to my head is it has less to do with electronics and it has to do with the rod and reel setup that you're using. For speckled trout, you want to feel that bite. And like I've said, they will spit that lure right back in your face and just keep moving. So I'm going to use from a boat. I'm going to use anywhere from 6 to 7 feet, and I want a medium light with a fast tip for some of these smaller baits, and as well as your mirror lures. Now, if I go to a larger profile, if I'm throwing a 27 MR, which is your next biggest size, or if I'm throwing, let's say, like this K-Wiggler's ball tail shad, which is a little bit larger, or a soft dine, which is MirrOlure's soft version of their hard bait, I want a moderate action on that rod because I feel like the hook set's a little better. Spencer Riggs and Toby Burton from down at Chasing Tails talk about it all the time, and I noticed better hook sets when I changed up and went to a medium rod with a moderate tip for larger profile baits. But in the wintertime, I really want that sensitivity with that fast tip and with that medium light action. Most speckled trout you're going to catch anywhere from your dink size up to 4, 5, 6 pounds, 7 pounds. You're not really going to have much of an issue getting that fish to the boat. I do like to fish a lot of braid. I fish Power Pro. You can pick whatever brand you want. That doesn't matter. I stick around 10 pounds. There's guys who like 15 pounds. There's guys who have 8 pounds. Find what's comfortable for you, but I do recommend braided line. And I recommend using some kind of leader anywhere from 10 pounds to 20 pounds in the wintertime. And I usually use about a 14 to 18 foot section. I don't use 3 foot of leader because that has to pass through those eyes and that wears that knot down where you connect the leader to the line. So fluorocarbon, mono, whatever you like. I think there's enough people who say you have to have A, B, or C. Pick what works for you. If you have a budget and you need to go pick up a 100-yard spool of 15-pound monofilament, then go use that. Just give yourself that advantage over just braid to your lure. The advantage that you get is you can retie the lures relatively easy without having to lose all the yardage on your braid. You get a little bit better kind of elasticity where when that fish hits, it's not going to just snap your line. It's going to give you a little bit of stretch to it. And if you do get hooked on bottom, it's a lot easier to break off monofilament than it is braid. So, and I use any of the colors, so it doesn't matter. High vis, green, red, but pick whichever one looks the best on your rod and go with that. I don't feel like these fish really care. I know a lot of people say the fish can see it, but I've caught 8-pound trout trolling a lure that was meant for a Spanish mackerel. So, and no reason it should have hit it, but it did. So.
All right, man, as I normally do, I have some questions. First up, why do you like braid on the reel and over monofilament?
So your monofilament's going to have a lot of memory. You don't get to cast as far. I do like to stay off of the fish. As much as I say I don't think that line bothers them, I do think they feel the pressure of that boat coming towards them. I know for a fact, I've talked to some friends who have put a transducer in a bucket and turned it on with water in it, and you could hear the ping from the transducer. So there is something going on that those fish can hear. So I want to stay off the fish, and I need braided line to get the longest cast I can possibly get. That's why I choose 10-pound braid. That's why I put that leader on the front. I can get a really, really long cast and work it in an area where I know those trout are, where I feel like those trout are, and I can stay off of them and not pressure them as much.
What's your favorite knot for tying leader to braid?
I stick with a double uni. There's a lot of them out there, Alberto knots. There's FG knots, whichever one. I try to do the one that I imagine I'm sitting out, poled down, it's blowing 20 miles an hour, and my client at 6:30 in the morning has just broke off his first leader. So I've got to retie really quick. What knot can I do? I can do a double uni in my sleep, so that's what I use.
What knot do you use to tie the lure, the jig head, to the leader? Is it a loop knot or is it cinched?
So neither. That's going to be a wild one. I'm glad you asked that. I actually use crankbait snaps. They're either VMC or Eagle Claw. They're size 2, so they're 50 pounds, and it allows me to change the lures out relatively quickly. I do cinch that down with a uni knot, but the actual clasp itself allows for freedom of movement for that lure. I have yet to lose a fish because of it. Somebody said too much hardware is a bad thing. The fish can see it. I said, well, I guess they missed the treble hooks hanging there and just saw the clip and went, oh crap, I can't bite that. So, but I've never lost a fish because of it. If I've lost a fish, it's usually for another reason. Now, I'm very mindful of the fact that is a very pliable piece of metal. And after, a full day of opening and closing those clasps, I'll check it. If it feels a little weak, cut it off, add another one. You can get them at Academy. They're 99 cents for a pack of 10. So.
All right. Well, next in the notes is what to do when the fish aren't cooperating, but I'm not there yet. I'm not ready to ask that question because I still want to hear more from Dana Tabarrini for when things are at least promising to work out or are working out.
Okay.
So, as you know from weekly reports, man, probably the biggest question people have is where to fish. I mean, what to throw and how to throw it, sure, but also where to fish. So, I guess my question would be either walk me through this morning. Like you've already talked about being up on the flat and covering the channel, but how do you cover water enough to know, like, all right, they're not here, let's try some different water? How do you know to try out on the flat? And you could approach this two different ways, I guess. Like, would sort of walk me through the thinking on the boat, either this morning or on a recent trip, or something else I'm curious about. Like, if I plucked you out of New Bern and plucked you into creeks either down in Ocean Isle or in Southport, how would you go about trying to figure that creek out?
I would call a local captain first. That'd be number one. One thing in New Bern and the Neuse River Basin here, especially upper of the ferry line up here from, well, even out towards South River, Dawson's Creek, Oriental, all those areas, the Pamlico Sound in general, we don't really have a tide here. We have a wind-blown tide. So that means that the water level changes mostly from the direction of the wind. The Neuse River is shaped from its head. It goes southeast, and then it flows out to northeast. So the section from New Bern to the ferry channel blows literally from a northwest wind, will blow water out and make the level of the river low. If you get a northeast wind, then it blows water in. Also, any real easterly wind kind of blows water in. So the biggest thing I look at when I'm looking at weather is it's not even how much wind is blowing, is it what direction is the wind blowing from? And if it's blowing from anything northwest to northeast, you're going to have a colder day. You're going to have cooler temperatures. If it's blowing from anywhere in the other spectrum in the south, southeast, southwest, you're going to have a little bit of a warmer day. And then with those, I'm going to then look at, is it blowing southwest and blowing water out? Is it blowing northwest, blowing water out? Again, westerly winds pushes water out. Easterly winds tend to help push water in. So I'm going to look at all that, and then I'm going to decide, all right, based on my notes, which I have notes from the past years of fishing, and it's monthly, January, February, March, blam, 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 all the way down to December. Where were these fish last year, and what were the conditions I was catching fish? The biggest problem is no one wants to put the time in, not on the water, but off the water, into recording when they had a good day, what was the conditions of that day? When they've had a bad day, what was the conditions of that day? And even worse, when you had a bad day and your buddy had a great day, what were the conditions where he was fishing? So, a lot of times you'll hear time on the water is what will tell you. Time spent off the water and what you take notes on and what you write down and what you remember, that's going to help you just as much as the times you're spending on the water itself, because that's going to help you decide where you're going in the future. So fished Sunday, and Sunday was a really windy day out of the northwest. We just had got off a front that moved through on Saturday, so it's post-frontal conditions, high pressure, pressure's increasing, fish are tight to the bottom. And when I say tight to the bottom, I mean like literally on bottom, probably bellies in the mud. Rockfish or striped bass were really active all over the place. We could catch stripers, but the trout that were underneath them just would not bite. And we managed a few, but nothing like it should have been based on what my electronics were telling me. And my electronics were telling me I've got fish up here, I've got bait in the middle, and then fish on the bottom. But for whatever reason, the fish on the bottom were not acting like the fish on the top. The fish on the top were the rockfish, fish on the bottom were the striped bass. So I took that information from Sunday, and I knew that the area that I fished on Sunday held trout. There were trout there. Today was a warming trend, and they're going to move up from that channel and feed on the flat for several reasons. Number one, there's bait present. Number two, it's a full moon cycle, and it was cloudy last night. So they didn't have the visible light shining down in the water, making it easier for them to detect predator or prey and eat all night. Most guys will tell you on a full moon cycle, they hate to fish. They'll say, I ain't fishing on no full moon. Well, depending on the conditions, it could help you. I think that they really, really feed well on these cycles, and especially if you have an overcast night, man, it was lights out. So I took all of that data, every bit of that data points, and I put it all together, and I went, I'm going to fish here. and I'm going to start in this method, and I'm going to make sure that that first hour to 2 hours in the morning when they should be feeding, that I'm going to be in the right spot based on all the information that I've put together before. And does it work every time? Absolutely not. But it has a higher percentage chance. And that's all you're really doing. It's not some magical solution where if I throw electric chicken into the wind with this current on this tide, on this, that magically a fish appears. No, it's putting all that stuff together and then saying, I think I have the best chance of catching a fish doing it like this. And when it works out, great. When it doesn't work out, adjust. Maybe go to a different color, or maybe speed your retrieval up, or slow down, or whatever you have to adjust. But that's how you're going to put all that information together. And it varies every single day. No days are the same. You take all the data that you have and you go, what's the day that mostly look like this? And I'm going to go fish there. So.
And so with the wind, are you usually fishing against the shore that the wind's blowing on, or the wind's blowing away from? I mean, am I oversimplifying?
No, that's not oversimplifying. In drum fishing, I will say I love a wind-blown bank. I've talked about that all summer long. I'm sure those fishing reports got a little mundane, but it was just spitting the truth out every week. When it comes to speckled trout, I'm going to do it whichever way works. So I've had situations where I need to cast into the wind because the way that the bait is working back, if it's super windy and I'm throwing with the wind, that bait might stay up in the column too much because the wind is pulling that line and keeping that bait up. Whereas if I'm throwing into the wind, maybe the current's moving towards me, which is a more natural direction for the bait to be moving, and that'll instigate a bite. So the answer is whichever way the fish likes it. And I know that doesn't really help people that much, but you've got to throw both directions to see what presentation style they like it. I've fished into the wind before in a creek recently with Addison Grantham, Unreal Addison, and in that direction against the wind, the fish did not bite. We literally turned around, fished right back out the direction we came, and with the wind, the fish bit. So no clue why, because the current was moving against us the whole time, but they bit moving against the current, which was against everything I'd ever believed about trout fishing, but proved me wrong. So.
All right, I got a couple more. For winter trout fishing, how much time do you invest in a spot before you think to yourself, let's try something else?
Two answers. Number one, without electronics, you're gonna be at a disadvantage because you can't see where they are. You're probably gonna spend a lot more time on historical data, which I think a lot of people do. I think they go, you know what, last year I caught fish right here. I'm just gonna fish here all day. That doesn't mean that it's wrong. That just means that that's what you're comfortable with. And for me, I like to think outside the box, and I like to just kind of explore, especially when I'm not on a charter. But I think you can spend too much time in one place. I don't know if you need to switch up a bait and do something different. A lot of times that'll matter. Again, changing those contours of fishing deep, medium, and shallow, that's really, really what's going to make the difference. If you catch a fish in an area, there are more than one fish there. If you don't get a bump and you've moved 100 yards down a bank and you feel like there should be fish there, try throwing in the opposite direction from where you just came, or try a different color before you leave. I wouldn't put a time limit on it because I'm using all kinds of factors to determine how long I'm going to sit in a different place. This morning we sat where we started for maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and we moved. The bite did taper off slightly, but honestly we moved because we had our limit by then, and we just wanted to go explore and see if we could find a larger fish. So then I went to areas that have produced larger fish for me, and a couple of spots, gave us fish, and a couple of didn't. So, but I'm not going to say there's too much time you can spend in a spot. I know some trophy anglers who will go sit on a certain spot for 6-8 hours looking for one single bite. So if you're looking to fill the box, I would move on quickly. if you're in a place where you know that it produces large speckled trout, I would probably stay there. So.
Okay. So now and this might be my last question before we go to your last talking point, but I'm guessing that most of this winter fishing for trout in your area we're talking about is up in the creeks and not out in the main Neuse River. And if that is so, around what time do you exclusively focus on creeks, and about what time do you stop focus on creeks and pull out into bigger water?
For people who are not familiar with the Neuse River Basin, and especially the upper Neuse, and the creeks that are involved in it, these creeks are cut way deep and they go way back, almost to the point where you can't turn your boat around. You have to back out to a certain spot so you can finally get your boat flipped around in the creek. And these creeks have some really deep spots, lots of structure, lots of stumps, lots of everything. And your pogies have pushed way, way back in these creeks. There are times when I can hear them hitting the bottom of the boat. There's so many pogies. I'm going to fish those areas until the speckled trout start showing up in different areas of the creek. So, starting in December, I'm usually midway of the creek towards the back, checking out where they are. Come January, February, I typically stay in the backs of the creeks. March, I really start looking for them to start pressing out. So maybe when I go into these creeks that I've been catching fish on or catching fish in, and I go in there one day and I'm in this one area that I know I caught fish last week there and they should not be gone yet. I'm not catching any fish and the conditions are right. I might fish a little bit out back to where I started and see if they've moved. I got on a pretty good school in a creek last year, starting in late February into March. It was right after I got back from Texas, and I followed those all the way out till April, almost May, and it was just following this same school of fish all the way out. And I ran several trips on that. We say it's the same school. Obviously, it could be multiple schools, but the pattern was they're exiting, but they're not exiting in a hurry. They're just kind of moving up through the creek until they get towards the mouth, and then when it's time to go, they leave. So,
all right, man. I like your last talking point here. I think it's intuitive because I think every angler can identify what you can do when the trout just aren't cooperating. All right, solve the riddle.
The really good option is to go home and hang out with your wife or your husband. That's always a good one. That's what my wife would tell me. We'll just go home. They're not biting. Come home. But no, I'm going to do something just way different. And when we talk about making big swings, I mean, I may go to the whole other side of the river. I may leave an area where I feel like they should be and just go to a different creek on the other side of the river and just go try over there. I may go out into the main river itself, into some deep spots, and just kind of look on electronics and see if there's bait and fish there. I might pull some, deep diver type lures out and start trolling those in deep water and see if that'll produce a fish. Anything that, typically you go in, water temp's 50 degrees, the fish should be here on this flat. There's plenty of bait. They're not biting. I'm throwing this mirror lure. I've thrown it for 3 hours and I'm irritated and they're not biting. You really have to do something different. You can't just keep doing that. You've got to do something different. So throw a popping cork. Throw a topwater bait. You would be surprised if that fish has moved up on a flat and that fish is large enough and mean enough. It doesn't care that it's 50 degrees. It will hit that topwater lure. Size down, size up, change colors. Really just kind of throw the whole kitchen sink at the fish. But the number one thing I think that people do wrong is that they fish too fast. You just need to slow down. And when I say slow down, don't come in on a bank and power fish it for 15 minutes and go, well, I didn't get a bite. The fish aren't here. If you're not used to being, well, number one, go find a comfort bait and throw that the whole day. Take a bait that you're comfortable with, throw that. And if it doesn't produce, you might not be around fish. But you really just got to just take a big swing, go somewhere else, pick a different creek, pick a different lure, Throw some live bait if you need to. Get some mud minnows. Do something that'll incite that bite to just kind of change your mindset. Because I believe that the anxiety that you feel goes through the line to that bait, and that bait's just not working how it should work because you're so anxious about wanting to catch a fish that you'll never work that bait properly. So the biggest thing is to just throw something different. Throw something you've never thrown before. Grab a lure that you're not comfortable with and teach yourself how to fish it. It's one of the things I did when I started fishing these little johns. I forced myself to fish it. And once it really started producing and I saw the benefits from it, it's now my go-to, and I feel like I can get on any boat in any condition and go catch a fish with it.
Man, this is basically when I do the old, hey, we're at the end of the podcast. Is there anything that, you might have thought we would touch on, but I didn't set you up with a question, or we just sort of missed it or got around to it? I do have a couple more questions, but let me give you that one.
Go ahead. Good.
Well, I guess one of the
No,
questions that I have, and I have this pretty standard when I'm talking to guys like you, when you have so many different people on your boat of different abilities, and I think you've hit on, it seems like you hit on the main mistake that people make. The main mistake is fishing too fast. Slow it down, fish too fast. And it got me thinking about what are the other main mistakes you see people make that you have to sort of guide them away from. And then I was also just wondering about how you advise people to be successful, the hook set when we're dealing with colder trout that might not really be smacking it.
So we use this phrase a lot. Hook sets are free. There's no shame in setting the hook on something that you think might be a bite. The trout bite in the wintertime is going to be really, really subtle. And again, it's going to be subtle till it isn't, but typically it's really subtle. And I'm going to say the rod setup is going to really help and benefit you in setting that hook a lot better. Again, that medium light rod with that fast tip for your smaller, stick baits and your smaller hard plastics. And then that moderate for those large baits. If you're throwing 27 MRs, if you're throwing soft dyne XLs, or even big Fat Boy Corkies or something like that, really pay attention to what kind of rod you're using. I don't think there's a wrong way to set the hook. We had a guy on the boat, Ben from Cash and Rods, and he sets the hook like a bass pro. That's what he grew up doing. So, he's got the hip thrust and the twist on the knee and everything. I was like, wow, look, that's a pretty professional hook set there. But it was very, very productive and very efficient. And I think the timing of setting that hook from how you feel it to the point where you set it, that's just something you got to work on. But the number one thing you can do is put the right equipment in your hands so that you can feel the bite. If you can feel the bite, you can react to the bite. If you don't feel the bite, then it's a moot point anyway.
This might be my last question. If I'm on your boat winter trout fishing, is there bycatch other than stripers? Are you hooking anything else? And even are you hooking stripers? Are they cohabitating?
Yeah, a lot of these fish cohabitate. Most of your inshore species cohabitate, and even more so, you'll get them cohabitating with. I think I used that word too much right then. You'll get them intermingled with pickerel, largemouth bass, white perch. There is a very large number of species in the Neuse River in and around New Bern that you'll find them intermixed, especially right now with this high salinity environment, meeting that fresh water coming down from the head of the Neuse River where it starts. So you'll catch catfish, you'll catch flounder. I've caught a bunch of flounder recently, especially using these soft plastics and bouncing them off bottom. Drum, still catching redfish. There are always resident fish. We have these migratory species that everybody thinks the trout have just left. I remember June of 2018 pulling out on a point, trying to catch a topwater striper in July, and caught 4 16-inch trout back to back. I'm like, what are you doing here right now? There's resident fish everywhere. So there's all kinds of fish that you can catch in the Neuse. It's not just speckled trout. Obviously, speckled trout's the queen of the dance this time of year. I think there's lots of reasons for that. It's the only fish you can keep where you can actually take 4 of them home instead of just 1, or 0. So that's obviously putting a lot of pressure on these fish. But again, if you can catch a drum that's over 18, take one of them home. That's awesome too. But they're around. They're definitely there.
All right. Now I'm at my last question. Tell me a little bit more about your podcast, or tell our audience a little bit more about your podcast and how they can watch and/or how they can listen.
10-4. It's on Spotify and Apple, and it's Reel2Reel Fishing, and it's a group of 4 of us who, when I originally started the podcast, it was going to be, I'm going to have a bunch of guests and do this and do that. And it really just kind of evolved into 4 dudes sitting around talking about fishing. It's myself, Ashley King, Kevin Dewar, and Ben Ricks. You guys who follow any of it know who they are. Rick's Brothers Outdoors, Keep Casting Charters, and 3D Charters, and then myself. And I always feel like things are more successful when you do it with friends. Trying to do it, if I tried to do it on my own and make it all about me, that's just not who I am. I like to see my friends succeed. I like to see them come alongside and just kind of help me through this process. And really, there's a lot of good stories to be told. Otherwise, you just hear me talking about Little Johns and, fishing deep water. Everybody has great ideas. We all bounce them off each other. We kind of talk trash to one another. It's a really good time. So you can go on Spotify or Apple, and it's under Reel2Reel Fishing. It's obviously not as fancy as the Fisherman's Post podcast, but, we try to hold our own once in a while.
Captain Dana Tabarrini, Reel2Reel Fishing. It's been a pleasure, to have you on the podcast, talk with you regular on our weekly, bi-weekly reports, but it's been a treat just to have you with an extended conversation. Thank you for making yourself available. I'm getting ready to say goodbye and hear what Billy has to say about Billy's best takeaway. What's your thought? What's Billy's best takeaway going to be?
I think he's going to talk about, it's going to be one of 2 things, depth or size of lure. He's going to talk about why he never really thought about really going down to a really small bait, or he's going to talk about not thinking about moving up to a flat. He may actually.
Man, I'm laughing because he doesn't think about any of that stuff, man. That kid doesn't throw a bait. He doesn't go fishing. He does not a thought in his brain, man.
Wow, Dana Tabarrini, ladies and gentlemen. Last guest of the year, and last time he's a guest, all in one episode. This is so great.
I gave him credit.
I know. He should be saying goodbye to me. You did nothing. I was the one that took the slam.
Oh, my
Dana,
hard
thank you
drive's
again,
full.
man. I'm going to sign off with Billy.
All right, brother.
Oh man, sorry, Dana. My hard drive just filled up. We just lost this episode. Actually, I got a page of notes rather. I got a few notes. And I thought he was going to hit on this when you asked him that question, because I was thinking about the depth of, because he did say number 1 mistake a couple of times, but you guys were in different categories, so I won't ping him on those. But the number 1 mistake in the first part of the conversation is not letting the lure hit completely to the bottom. So practice that, figure out what that feels like, and have a little bit more success. And then later on in the conversation, and you started asking him about mistakes. I'm like, come on, Gary, get off my stuff, man. Like, get out of here. But another one is fishing too fast. So if you come up to an area, especially in the colder months, like fishing a little too fast. So yeah, man, that was it. And then get the right gear so you can feel the bite. That's my 3 takeaways. 3 for episode 140. Get that good gear so you can feel the twitch on the end. And go check out their podcast too. I'm gonna go check it out. I've actually listened to a couple of episodes, or at least half an episode. So
I'm waiting to be invited to be a guest before I listen to that podcast. So I have high standards.
Yeah, man. Let me come on there. We can talk about podcasting. Okay. It'd be fun. I swear, your audience will love it.
Billy, what's the number 1 mistake with podcasting?
Well, I'm not. Anyway, let's move on.
Yes, I will. To bring it back to fishing, I think like letting the jig head, the soft plastic, get all the way to the bottom can be a challenge, just because you're anxious, man. You want to catch a fish and you just won't wait. You won't wait. And like he says, man, there's a subtlety to it. So being connected with that bottom in cold, slow times with light weights, light jigs, light soft plastics can be the challenge. But, we like a challenge. We like fishing because we like a challenge.
And that's what, I bet you see that with your kids a lot. They probably get bored, just holding the rod, not catching anything, and all of a sudden they're just slaying fish on the front of the boat. Well, actually, you probably put them on the back. You probably don't even let them on the front. What am I
Yeah,
saying?
man, I take kids to go float live shrimp, man. I don't take kids to throw soft plastics in December, January, and February. My kids. Now, I know plenty of fishy kids. This is, plenty of fishy kids that'll outfish you, me, everyone, whether it's winter, fall, summer, spring. But those aren't my kids. My kids, we're going to be floating live shrimp and watching the bobber go down.
Because they learn how to fish from you, Gary.
Yeah, I
Captain,
love
let me
bobber
know
fishing.
let me
as
know
a
when the
matter of
rod
fact.
bends and hand it to me. Until then, I'm gonna eat my bologna sandwich and crackers.
I'm no elitist. I'll float a live shrimp under a bobber.
Oh man, well, great episode, Gary. Appreciate it, man. Love Dana. You guys go support Dana. Book him on a trip. Learn all his tips and tricks. So I'm sure he'll give them to you. Just go and take a tape recorder and have your own podcast. Just chop it up into pieces and put it out there. 20 episodes right there. It's
Whether
easy.
it's a podcast or the weekly fishing reports, man, he's never really hesitated to share. That's easily one of his strong qualities, man. And I say it at the fishing schools that we do. I say it regular. Like, if you're seeking out information, sure, a podcast, sure, weekly fishing reports, whatever it is. But man, there really is no substitute, in my opinion, for getting out on the water with a Dana Tabarrini and experiencing it, asking it, and living it in real time. I mean, if you're looking to escalate your game, life is short, time on the water is precious. Give yourself every opportunity.
Exactly. And the best opportunity after you go on with Dana is to go to Marine Warehouse, buy a boat, pull up beside of him. What up, dude? Saw you last week.
Hey, you took me to this hole last week, man.
Hey, it's crazy to see you here.
Mind if I slide in?
I just want a couple casts, bro. Just right on the point. Right where the water depth changes, what you showed me. We're friends,
Hey,
right?
what about this bait? Is this a good one to throw? Can you see from your boat over here? Should I throw this one?
Here, let me just toss it onto the deck, and you tell me, and then toss it back in the water.
You got some if I toss this bait over here, will you put some Procure on it for me?
I forgot my pliers. You got some over there as well? Hey, actually, I caught one. Here, I'm going to send it over. You take it off the hook. Oh, God.
All right.
Dude. I'm going to Marine Warehouse right now to get a boat just to do that. They take refunds? No, I'm just kidding. All right. Anyway, go support Marine Warehouse, and we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks, Gary.